Thank you. So friends, we welcome you to this very exciting session of evolving trends in refractive surgery. We all know refractive surgery has been going from strength to strength. There are so many new procedures which have come to make surgery safer, better, more quicker. And most importantly, now there are so many new additions that you have to really customize the procedure choice to your patients. So we actually have great speakers with us. And along with me, we have our moderator, Dr. Krishna Prasad Kudlu, who is a very prolific refractive surgeon from Udupi. And he has been training a lot of surgeons also for SMILE procedure. So welcome, Dr. Kudlu,
Thank you.
as
Thank
the
you,
moderator.
Vardhaman. In fact,
Thank
whatever you said is correct. I think it has been from past 10 to 15 years. It started with PRK, then we started doing the blade LASIK, then comes the femto. Now the era of SMILE is going around. I think this session is going to be the fantastic session. The name itself tells that evolving trends of refractive surgery. So I think we have got a gadgets of speakers, starting with Pooja. Then we have got Ritika Sachdev, we have got Rajan Gupta. You yourself talking some of the suction loss management in SMILE, and also in the end we are having a talk from Dr. Anant Reddy. He is talking about perfecting SMILE my way. So I think over to you, Vardhaman.
Thank you.
Before we start, just sorry to interrupt. Let me quickly tell you that we have 5 speakers, so 12 minutes for each speakers, and rest of the time 15 minutes for general discussion.
Thank you very much.
No,
So
according to the timings given in the program, it is 10 minutes per speaker. That's okay. This is the last session.
Okay.
According to the time given by the company, what they mailed me, it is 10 minutes.
Okay, let's do it for 10 minutes then. No problem.
yeah, try to stick to 10 minutes then. Yeah, sure, great. So I think to begin the session, we have Dr. Pooja Kamar. She is from Narayan Nethralaya. She has done a lot of work on as a clinician and scientist about SMILE. She holds a PhD from the University of Netherlands, and she is going to speak to us about corneal nerves and SMILE surgery. Over to you, Pooja.
Thank you, Dr. Vardhaman. Just 1 minute. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. KP sir, Dr. Vardhaman, Zayas team and AIS for giving me this opportunity to talk on SMILE nerves and its impact on SMILE surgery. At the outset, I have no financial disclosures. Whatever I'm going to speak is a lot based on my PhD work on wound healing in refractive surgery and our recent studies. So whenever we see this topography, if you can see here, there's a little bit of suspicious present here, and we don't know what lies beneath. So there can be a lot of things like, patient having contact lens intolerance, or it can be irregular epithelium coinciding with this inferior steepening. And this can be because of the poor nerves or a meibomian gland dropout. We all know that a lot of ocular surface changes will lead to a little bit of subtle topographic irregularities. So it all basically depends on how healthy your nerves are, and when you operate on a patient, how the outcomes are going to be. We all know that yes, SMILE is a smaller cut, so it's a nerve preserving procedure, but still, let's see what the outcomes are. How do we study nerves? This is like a schematic on how your corneal nerves are placed on the cornea, and what place and how do we capture them. We have a confocal microscopy which can help us image the nerves. This is how your healthy nerves look like. The bundles and all are very healthy, and the branching and all is extremely healthy as well. But whenever your nerves are unhealthy, you'll see that the nerves start becoming deteriorating in size, shape, and the amount as well. And this inflammatory cells, they keep coming in. Now these inflammatory cells are nothing but known as dendritic cells as well. They're inflammatory cells lying somewhere in the periphery, but whenever there is inflammation, it starts coming in towards the center. And then if these are immature dendritic cells, where you can see that they are without tentacles, but then there are more aggressive inflammatory cells, the dendritic cells, which are you can see the tentacles here, and you can hardly see any nerves here. That means there's a lot of inflammation going on in this cornea. And then this is microneuroma as well. Microneuromas, which are the budding towards the end of the nerves, or any abnormal bulking of the nerve fiber, which can also lead to your pain, pain without stain, where your tear film metrics are normal, but your patients have a lot of complaints. So these are just the signs of unhealthy nerves in your eye, and this can happen in healthy corneas where patients don't have any symptoms, but still this can be there. So now, how will it impact your refractive surgery if these nerves are there? As I said, these patients might not have any symptoms. We have been working on studying these nerves and how it can impact the refractive surgery, the visual outcomes, the aberrations, and the neuroregeneration as well. So let's take these 3 patients and 2 case scenarios where you can see the meibomian glands are very much healthy, suggesting of normal ocular surface, a healthy ocular surface. You can see here the nerves are also healthy. And this is the epithelial map. I've just put epithelial map because that is what clinicians normally go to. If your ocular surface is healthy, your epithelium is going to be healthy and regular. But when your ocular surface is unhealthy, you can see some amount of meibomian gland loss present here. The nerves are unhealthy, presence of some dendritic cells. Your epithelium, which you can see as a clinician on one of the tools, is also irregular. There's a lot of irregularity present here. Now, when you go ahead and operate on both of this kind of patients, abnormal wound healing starts to set in. And if you can see here, these are all normal wound healing at 6 months post-operatively. But here, where there was a lot of inflammation to begin with, the nerves have not regenerated properly. And here you can still see hardly there are any nerves. And these are the patients who are going to have a lot of symptoms. And of course, the epithelium is going to be irregular, which will in turn impact the visual outcomes. If there is a lot of epithelial irregularity present there, it will lead to abnormal or poor quality of vision. Your patient might be 6'6", but the quality of vision is going to be poor. And they can complain of a lot of glare and halos. That is one part of it. There can be other issues as well. And this will lead to poor quality of vision. So just there is a cascade of what happens when you have an irregular epithelium or a poor ocular surface. And long terms, our group has published, if you do a PRK, if there's a lot of inflammation, it can lead to haze, or even it can lead to ectasia as well, or poor quality of vision. So now this is just how your normal wound heal. Like this is when you do LASIK and SMILE. You can see how quickly the nerves heal in SMILE, but here still at 5 months, the nerves are still healing. Here at 6 months, the healing has been complete. So it basically shows that, in LASIK, there is a slow recovery of the nerves in a healthy surface. It does recover, but it takes more than 6 months to recover, whereas in SMILE, you almost see a complete recovery at 3 months. So suggesting that, yes, the SMILE has a nerve preserving procedure. And this is just outcomes like when you do LASIK surgery and poor cornea, your visual outcome is worse. And if you do a SMILE, the nerve regeneration is better here compared to that of LASIK at 6 months. And the quality of vision is also better in here compared to that of LASIK. So this just shows that if you have poor nerves to begin with, first of all, yes, you would like to treat, but in case sometimes you have you've missed something, and if you do a SMILE procedure, the recovery is going to be better, the wound healing is going to be better, and the quality of life and vision is going to be better. And this is just a small work. We further went ahead and studied how the inflammation in the eyes with the tears and on the collecting the cadaveric eyes. We saw that yes, SMILE had lesser inflammation to begin with, and the extracellular matrix remodeling was also better in SMILE, suggesting that there is enhanced wound healing response in SMILE compared to LASIK. So this all suggests that a SMILE has a little bit of added advantage here when it comes to LASIK. So what we can do in future is, if you have such kind of patients, they, a lot of times they're not going to wait. So one of the possibility would be that you do a deeper cap, to study how the visual outcomes are, how the biomechanical changes are, and how the wound healing is when you have a poor ocular surface, or otherwise as well in a deep cap compared to a normal cap, which would be 100 to 110 microns. The hypothesis is if there is a poor nerve and you do a deep cap, there will be better regeneration of nerves, because you're trying to avoid touching those inflammatory nerves and generating a cascade of it, which will lead to a post-op regular epithelial regeneration, which will have a poor quality and quantity of vision and life. So this will preserve all these complications to have a better healing. So just to summarize, unhealthy nerves, corneal nerves, are a sign of inflammation. Irregular epithelium profile is a sign of poor ocular surface and unhealthy corneal nerves. Refractive surgery on a poor ocular surface can lead to abnormal wound healing or a poor quality of life. And future would because as we saw in the SMILE has a better chance when it comes to nerve regeneration and wound healing. Even further deepening the cap at around 130 or 140 microns would optimize these outcomes to prevent any abnormal corneal consequences. At the outset, I would like to thank my team for helping me put up this presentation and helping me with my research. Thank you.
Great. I think it was a wonderful talk, Dr. Pooja, and we really laud the entire team of Narayan Nethralaya for doing really a great basic science research and translating into our clinical applications. So when it comes to this whole thing about the nerves and the smile, as you have rightly said, the smile procedure is more forgiving. Have you compared between smile and the surface ablations when it comes to the nerve regeneration as well as the dry eye profile?
For us it's an ongoing study, but the literature does say that, you know, when it comes to surface ablation, again, the nerve regeneration is a little bit delayed in PRK compared to that of smile. So PRK would have an added advantage when it comes to your suspicious corneas or your other things, like your indices are suspicious, but otherwise smile would be a better procedure.
So
because PRK has also other disadvantages like pain and haze, and we know that we now have options to prevent that pain, but still there is some discomfort. They have to wear contact lenses for 3 months. So smile always will have a better advantage.
so patient who already has a pre-existing dry eye, currently smile will be the procedure of choice
Best.
in given session. So Dr. KP, any comments from you?
Yeah, actually, the start of this AOSC, that is on the Wednesday, we had a Professor Sikando. I think you also came in between, and you are also part of that subspecialty day on refractive surgery. So that day, Professor Sikanda was very particular about telling. He had a comparative slide of PRK versus femtolasic versus smile. So he was telling that as far as the treatment overall, the visual quality, of course, visual quality little bit takes more time in PRK. And as far as the biomechanical stability is concerned, what he said that PRK and smile scores the equal marks. That is what he said that. But if you cannot compare, like definitely smile has got a definite edge over the femtolasic, but still with the PRK, there are a lot of advantages are there. That's what he is telling. But as Pooja said that, first time I'm hearing that as far as the nerve regeneration is concerned, I think smile score a better, I think.
Because in PRK, sir, you're burning the surface. There's an ablation procedure where you are removing the epithelium and then you're burning your Bowman's and your stroma as well. So you're actually burning those nerves. So the regeneration will, of course, it will be healthy because they're all new nerves. Rather than LASIK where there is a cut, but of course it is going to be more delayed than what we see in smile. But however, I can give you specific answers in next few months.
Yeah, very good, Pooja.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. KP. So I think now we will call upon Dr. Ritika.
We cannot hear you, Vardhaman. You are out of. I think there is some problem with your net. Correct, no, Pooja? We cannot hear Vardhaman.
Yeah, I think even I thought it was my connection.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello,
now we can hear you. In between, we lost you, Vardhaman. It got cut. Anyhow, before Vardhaman logging in, I think I invite one more prolific surgeon from Delhi and a fantastic speaker, none other than Ritika Sajdev. And she'll be talking about upgrading the pulse of your refractive practice. Over to you, Ritika.
Thank you so much, sir. Are my slides visible and I'm audible?
Very clear.
I'll be taking you over the commerce of refractive surgery and looking at the role that smile has to play in upgrading your practice. Now, these are reports from MarketScope that though refractive surgery as a market is growing by 4%, it is a large amount of market share that is shifting to smile in Korea and China. Of course, we don't have substantial reports like this in our country, but this clearly shows that smile is resonating very well with surgeons and with patients. And it is a tipping point where this technology is becoming so popular for patients that it becomes now a very viable and go-to investment for surgeons. So let's just go in flashback about a decade ago. LASIK wave had come, but the LASIK bubble did not last as much because a lot of people put up LASIK. We ourselves started seeing that though the demand was not increasing, the number of LASIK vision centers was increasing, and that led to a price war. And overall, LASIK was commoditized to a procedure where we had traded value for price. So we were just talking about price. We were not talking about the value that the technology brings or concentrating on really educating the patient. So these are the number of LASIK centers that we had. And as we look back at these centers, we saw that the numbers were stagnant across most LASIK units, but the 4 Smile installations over the years continued to really do well. So Smile really was a missing piece that allowed us to upgrade our practice. Why that was so is because it clearly resonated with the patient. The patient understood that this is a bladeless, flapless, all laser procedure. When we were telling the patient, this is standard LASIK, this is customized LASIK, this is wavefront optimized LASIK. So even to the extent of topo guided, these were basically marketing packages that the patient did not fully understand. We were just upgrading patients basis, different scientific HOAs or models, but we were not really offering them something that they could clearly see and understand, which is what Smile does when it does away with the flap. A lot of people have also seen or heard about LASIK flap related complications, and they're fence sitters. So having a Smile also helps you address that market. So all in all, Smile allows you to differentiate yourself when others are just fighting a price war with LASIK. You now have a technology that is poised to deliver not only in terms of results, but communicate a value to the patient. And of course, all Smile users also continue to offer LASIK. So you do cater to all. But what we have seen is that 78% of our practice today is Smile in centers which have both Smile and LASIK. And the remaining part that is not there has a high amount of patients who are unfit for Smile due to thickness issues or hyperopia. When you have a refractive procedure, you must make sure that the communication is befitting of that. So I think the problem that early Smile users had was that the top of the funnel, that is the overall awareness for the procedure, was not very high, say 5-6 years ago. That problem is no longer there. So we have a good awareness of the procedure, and as all Smile users should do, I think we should contribute to more and more information on the internet, be it as answers on Quora or social media testimonials or short videos, particularly in vernacular language, to basically communicate to the patient the advantages of this procedure. The middle of the funnel we've all been working on because we do local marketing to basically popularize the procedure and our facility for the procedure. And bottom of the funnel, of course, is dealing with the patient once they walk into our facility and making sure that the service that they get ensures that they do convert and trust the facility. So this is what we were doing many years ago when we really launched Smile. You see that the words here are Relax Smile. The nomenclature has changed. Now we call it only Smile. The communication is you still have spectacles because you still have doubts, trying to address the market that this is now a new procedure, no doubts, no spectacle, and we always call it beyond LASIK. Because LASIK is still a more commonly used jargon and Smile is not as commonly used. Irrespective of whatever your advertisement says, you must have call to action points. You see here, they can call you, they can email you, they can SMS you, they can visit your website. You have a QR code where they can see the procedure happen in either an animated form or as a video. So though the communication being constant is important, the media has changed over years, and now we've moved to digital media because we are now speaking to millennials and Generation Y. This generation grew up with technology and actually speaks to technology almost like it's a person. For them, Google review is the new word of mouth. Technology is no longer a yellow page. It is the internet which helps them understand the technology, understand your facility, understand you as a surgeon. And sometimes it's not only what you are saying, but what others are saying about you that's equally important. Studies have shown that this generation, though, is cost conscious, yet they're not looking for discounts. They're looking at a value add. They're willing to pay more for something that seems to be worth it. And they are very open to financing options. So as a Smile users, do continue to market it as a premium procedure. Fortunately, the PI doesn't allow us to drop the price. So we hopefully will not get into a price war, but do offer financing options to these patients. These patients trust technology. We have a lot of patients who don't come for the surgeon anymore, but come for the technology. But yet they want a personalized experience. They want to know how this technology fits into their life. And they want an experience where they are valued as a patient or a consumer of the technology. This is the way the internet searches have progressed. There is a lot of search volume that has increased on the mobile. So whatever you are putting up on the internet, please make sure it's mobile friendly, including your website. Having a mobile friendly website and having good content, including having words like Smile and LASIK written, often having good backlinks, allows you to show up when somebody is searching for smile. But the disclaimer here is there are not enough people searching for smile. Smile is more of a dental connotation. So there are more people searching possibly for spectacle removal or LASIK surgery, or even vernacular terms like chashme ka laser. So you have to know the search volumes of the words that you should optimize, because you have to be visible when they are searching for what they want to know, and not just pop up when you think that is the right term which is relevant to you. The term is only relevant when once it has search volume and is being typed by the consumer. So over a period of time, your website, if made right with the right contents and backlinks, will show up when it is being searched for the technology. But till then, you can also do Google AdWords, but target them well. If you have a center, for example, in Bangalore, you don't want to be targeting New Delhi, but a New Delhi center may target up to 200-300 kilometers. You may go up to UP, but so the demographic targeting, the age targeting has to be taken into account. Once you target them and they're basically looking at smile, don't get them to the homepage of your website. Everybody today wants curated content. Get them to the relevant page and have easy actionables like book an appointment or call us. Now, social media also allows you to create a lot of social listening, be it through Facebook, and actually the Facebook has become the older generation, and the newer generation is now on Instagram and giving us better leads for refractive. But there are tier 2 cities where Facebook still leads. Social media advertisements, again, can be marketed in a manner with greater analytics if you give back the data that this is a relevant lead, so that you can get more leads like it by like-to-like marketing. You also have to create engagement on various forums like Quora, and you should have good content on YouTube. Twitter, I am not a fan of. I think it's basically too pseudo-intellectual and just people putting out complaints or opinions, and not really sometimes a very healthy way to communicate. So these are the sample creatives. These also have changed over time. You see, this is a simple in-your-face creative. Unframe is a word that we use when we are talking about spectacle removal. This is a campaign which talks about how it changes your life to get a refractive surgery. You see here, this is a COVID time campaign. So it says safety first. It has your brand logo, and it has a very subtle way of saying that this is the way to enhance your life, be it for a sport enthusiast or somebody who's just getting it done to look better. This is speaking to the home cook in someone. This is speaking to someone who's a movie buff, who's really binge watching, that this is a way to improve the life that you have. And people, because they're locked in, are wanting to spend more on quality of life than on other things which were earlier a priority. This is a flash sale that you can also do at a consistent time in a year. I remember Vardhaman saying that they do a LASIK camp at a particular time in a year. Consistency is important, because once you do it consistently, the recall value increases. So this also helps cater to patients who waited all year, because they do need the discount. These are simple campaigns just to keep the patient engaged. This is, Spider-Man versus Peter Parker. The difference is spectacles. Why these campaigns are important is that because it normally takes about a 1 year to a 2 year cycle for a consumer to make up their mind that they want to go for refractive surgery. So these engagement campaigns and display ads to help keep them hooked. I'd just like to conclude by saying that you may communicate, but what you get is data. And this data is what leads to leads. So you must capture this data in the form of landing page. You see here, there's a landing page. A landing page, unlike a website, will allow you to give offers. There is a captcha code to ensure that the lead is correct. There are actionables. There is an easy EMI facility available. So this data has to be captured, and you have to make it part of a CRM. What a CRM does is that once the data is captured, you can continuously speak to this consumer. You can use this consumer even post-surgery to become a brand ambassador and refer more consumers to you. So the CRM is an important tool, because you cannot just spend money on marketing and burn it without capturing the data and working on the data. Once a person walks into your center, of course, the center has to speak in the same communication. And if you are a smile center on Facebook, you better be a smile center inside, and the communication has to be consistent. All online leads have to be answered within 48 hours, otherwise they're nearly dead. Do have a dedicated refractive counselor. And do continuously use almost free tools available to just search the internet about the overall sentiment about your facility, about Smile, and search the competition as well. It gives you great ideas. And the good thing about online advertisement is that it's very easily analyzed. So you will easily know what's working. A word of caution, don't take calls in 2 weeks. Online campaigns tend to optimize over a few weeks, sometimes months. So just have some staying power with the money that you're putting in online, and you will see the results. Just the last bit, I think all of us as doctors, as institutions, and as a technology, Smile are basically looking at creating great brands. And the best way to create a great brand is to keep your promises. So Smile as a technology is definitely a promise kept both for the surgeon and the patient. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ritika. Fantastic talk. I think really eye-opener for me, especially I practice in a two-tier city, and by hearing you, it really, I need to really sit with our marketing team, what exactly they have to do. I still remember one of your talk, I think 3-4 years before, when Smile first came into Center for Sight, before you're joining with, before Rupal joined you, you told me about one of the marketing, your lift, the lift, what you have put the Smile photograph, and with that only your marketing start. So that time you had really mentioned about in-house marketing also equally play a important role, like what you do it in the social media. And whatever I think probably real eye-opener for me, I think I need to come to Delhi to sit with you for at least 3-4 hours to make my marketing strategy more. What do you feel, Vardha? I think Vardhaman is also very good in marketing.
Yeah, Vardhaman, I've seen a lot of social media posts.
No, I think we all have to learn, and I think Ritika has been great in terms of.
Vardhaman's frozen.
Yeah. So anyway, it was an excellent talk, Ritika. I'm very happy with that. Really eye-opener for me.
Sir,
So
I just think there's one point that marketing should be looked at as a science and not as something that is incorrect. That is a take-home message. As individuals, we've always marketed a service to a patient or a consumer. And till the world knows about what you have, you can't get maximum returns. So the mindset of it being a science and a positive impact is something that I think.
and definitely see what I observed all these years, Rise being such a wonderful company, their technology is always ultimate. But as a company, their German company, they're very much little bit behind as far as the marketing is concerned. But the technology is probably the ultimate because we have been seeing the Smile results in comparison with any of the LASIK, femto-LASIK or LASIK result. Definitely much far superior technology than any other technology. But we need to, behalf of the company also, since we bought the machine, our job to market it in more better way so that we get more and more patient. And the one more point I really appreciated you, even in spite of I practice in a smaller place, still patient don't mind paying, especially as far as the refractive surgery is concerned. They want something better, they want the best, because they are all young patients.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. So I'm sorry about my video glitch. So I think a couple of points which stood out from Ritika's talk were, one of them is that once you have the data with you, it is very important that you deal with this data accurately, as she has very, very rightly said. And one thing I would like to ask Ritika is, like, over years now, you have been managing your brand for a long time. Over years, from print media going to the online media, how your, let us say, budgets have changed pertaining to a particular media versus online media?
We normally spend about 4% of our revenue on marketing. And right now we are spending about half of it on digital. And that is because in certain tier 2 cities that we are, hoardings, etc., work better. And Dr. Mahipal still likes to spend on newspaper. Newspapers are dead, as per me, at least in metros. And that money on digital gives great returns. And I think the only difference is that if you're marketing in a smaller city, use vernacular language. For example, in a center in UP, when we use Hindi, we get returns. So it's not that the media is wrong. You have to understand how that media is working.
Absolutely.
Be it through WhatsApp business or Facebook, which may work in a smaller city, or in Instagram, which may work in metro. You have to find your way around digital. It'll work everywhere.
Great, great. And I think in post-COVID era, of course, as you said, print media is probably dead. So I think it is better to allocate this budget somewhere else online. All right. Thank you so much. I think, Ritika, it was wonderful, eye-opening.
And let us go to the next talk by Dr. Rajan Gupta. He's from
Talk by you. And now we go
Vardhaman, we cannot hear you. So we'll go to the next talk by Dr. Rajan Gupta. He's a prolific phaco-refractive surgeon from Tohana, Haryana, and is my very good friend also. He's been doing a lot of topo-guided LASIK with the MEL 90 system. Would like to hear from him. Over to you, Rajan.
Yeah, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, audible.
Yeah. Good evening, dear friends. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Vardhaman, Dr. K.P. Kudlu, and the Zeiss team for giving me the opportunity to share my views on topo-guided LASIK, which is my approach to laser vision correction with Zeiss MEL 90 in borderline corneas. So whenever a patient of refractive surgery walks into a clinic, first of all, we should know where is selection criteria for this. We can do the refractive surgery. In myopic patients, we can treat up to -5 diopter with PRK, and with the LASIK, we can treat up to -8 diopter. In hyperopic patients, we can treat up to +2.5 diopter spherical by PRK, and by LASIK up to +4 diopter spherical equivalent. In astigmatic patient, we can treat up to 2.5 diopter of cylinder by PRK, and in the LASIK patient up to 4 diopter of the cylinder. So various limitations of laser vision correction are: the center corneal thickness should be more than 470 microns for PRK, and it should be more than 490 microns for LASIK patients. Residual stromal thickness should be more than 400 micron in PRK with the epi on, and more than 300 microns for LASIK patients. And the refractive error should be between -8 diopter spherical to +4 diopter spherical, and percentage tissue alteration should be less than 40%, and keratometry reading should be between 39 diopters to 48 diopters. So let's have a case study of a female, which is 24 years of age, has a manifest refraction of -6 diopters with a -2 diopter cylinder at 180 degrees. The mean keratometry readings are 42.71 diopters. The pachymetry is 500 microns. We can select a flap thickness of 90 microns in this patient. So it's a borderline cornea, but I can do it. How? First of all, which procedure to choose among the LASIK and PRK? I will go for LASIK. I'll choose a thin flap LASIK that is 90 micron, maybe LASIK or topo-guided LASIK over PRK. Why not PRK? Because of the postoperative pain, the late visual recovery, and the risk of aging high refractive errors. So should I go for a standard LASIK or topo-guided LASIK? So important things to notice are the residual stromal thickness after 90 micron flap should be around 300 microns. Patient should have a normal topography, and PTA should be less than 40%. The standard treatment offers based on the keratometry readings, the pachymetry values, and the refractive prescription of the patient. It corrects a spherical and cylindrical component only, and it's a good option for patients having the normal topography. The TopoLine offers us the unique capability that provides surgeons a greater degree of individual personalization. This procedure is redefining the quality of vision, proving that many patients experienced better vision than they ever did with glasses or contact lenses. So it offers us a choice of basket. Out of topo-guided LASIK, we can correct the refractive error based on the topography of the cornea, centering the ablation profile of the visual axis for better visual recovery, and maintain the asphericity of cornea with a reduced depth of ablation. And the topo smoothing offers us the anterior corneal surface smoothing with or without refractive error correction. So topo-guided LASIK has two principal elements, that is the assessment of topography and the centering the ablation of the visual axis. So the platform provided by the Zeiss is the Atlas Corneal Topographer, the CRS Master software, and the examiner may be used MEL 80 or MEL 90. So patient's eye is imaged on corneal topographer and analyzed using unique elevation points on the cornea. And the Atlas data is sent to the CRS Master, that is the topo-guided planner, to create a customized ablation profile which allow the combination of standard and topographic guided surgery. So you should see the topographic preview on the CRS master, that is the planning station. The pupillary center is represented by the orange cross, which determines the center of the optical zone, and it represents the anatomical center of the cornea. And the green cross represents the ring center, which is the corneal apex position, very much close to the visual axis, and it corresponds to the manifest refraction. And the pupil to ring center distance represents the topographically derived angle kappa. So in the treatment planning software, import the topography to the CRS master and enter the various treatment parameters, that is the manifest refraction, the target refraction, the optical zone, the procedure selection, that will be LASIK or PRK, the various flap parameters, and the treatment mode may be topography or topo smooth, and the keratometry readings, which are imported from the topo automatically. So let's come back again to the case of the female 25 years of age, the -6 diopter spherical with the -2 diopter slender at 180 degree. Now you see the difference between standard and topo guided. You can see the residual stromal thickness in the standard treatment planning is the 273 microns. In the topo guided treatment, it is 302 microns. So the patient which looked impossible to go for the LASIK surgery could be done with the topo guided treatment. So I could expect the extra benefit for the patient, converting the patient to the LASIK surgery. The topographic guided ablation principle is the ablation starts from the topmost the irregularity of the corneal surface. So the important things to notice about this topo guided treatment is the perfect topography measurement is the precondition for a successful topo guided laser treatment. The inaccurate or unreliable data from the topography will lead to an inaccurate treatment. So the excimer laser automatically adjusts the laser pulses to match the topo guided planning. So what else we can do with the topo guided treatments? It can be used to treat the corneal irregularity, the optical zone enlargement, for the decentered ablations, for the flap complications, the corneal haze, and the irregular astigmatism. So the very indication for topo guided smoothing is the eyes which cannot be well corrected with glasses or the contact lenses, the spherocylindrical correction, and which have the irregularities on the corneal surface with the inconsistent refraction. The ablation profile is based on the topo guided map only, which is a two-step approach. First, we create a regular cornea, and later we correct the refraction with standard treatment. It provides us the higher safety and the predictability. So the customization by the topo guided planning offers us the tissue shaving solution. The clearly reduced depth of ablation is the major benefit, in particular also for the secondary treatments. So it's a leap forward, the topo guided treatment. It proves, and the results are clinically proven, which show the improvement in uncorrected visual acuity and the best corrected visual acuity with excellent visual outcomes. And the clinical results indicate statistically significant improvement in the contrast sensitivity as well, and the improved control of lower order aberrations and correct the topographical irregularity, that is the higher order aberrations. So to summarize, the topo guided LASIK offers us the correction of refractive error based on topography, the ablation of the visual axis for the better visual quality, and maintain the asphericity of the cornea with the reduced depth of ablation, and the topo smoothing of the anterior corneal surface with or without refractive error correction. And secondary treatments can be done for the decentered ablation, the small optical zone, the central islands, the flap complications, the corneal haze, and the irregular astigmatism. So no one else can play your part. You should look for these topo readings on your own. You should take 7 to 8 scans. There should be no irregularity, no dry eye patches. So the best part is we can offer along with the reduced depth of ablation. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the patient listening and giving the opportunity to talk. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Rajan. It was a fantastic talk. Actually, what I seen with this machine, MEL 90, the results of topo guided is at par with any best machine in the world. So that is what I was talking my previous talk with Ritika also. The greatness about MEL 80 or MEL 90, these are flying spots lasers. So it works really well with the topo guided treatment, and the amount of tissue loss in topo-guided treatment will be much lesser compared to the wavefront guided LASIK. And still, I think in the coming days, you will see that the treatment with the MEL 90 will be the similar to the treatment what people offer even in the one of the competitive brand Contora. Soon you will know that the topo-guided treatment of MEL 90 will be same as the Contora treatment. That's what I just wanted to tell you. All these lasers, either Contura or MEL 90 or Swing, all these three machines, exact technologies is working on the flying spot lasers. So technology is same. So a little bit changes from the each company when they're giving you, but the results are going to be the same. Thank you, Rajat. So let's move on to our moderator. I think, Vardhaman, any comments from your side, or straight away we'll go to your talk? There is some.
No, just a short comment. I think it was a wonderful. Yeah, there was some small internet glitch on my side, so I have changed my location. Sorry about that trouble. So I really enjoyed the talk by Dr. Gupta. And as what we have to understand overall, that we are talking about so many different technologies, is that now if you do LASIK, then you are not anymore a refractive surgeon. If you want to be a refractive surgeon, then you should know actually the nuances of all different kinds of refractive surgery, such as SMILE, topo-guided femtolasic procedures, surface ablation procedures, as well as the phakic lenses. And we have to make sure that for your given patient, whatever is the best suited solution you should provide. For example, for majority of my patients who have mainly spherical errors with low astigmatism, SMILE is definitely my first choice. But for somebody who has a higher amount of astigmatism, more than 2 or 2.5 diopters, I choose the topo-guided femtolasic procedure for them, and they do very, very well. So basically, it is very crucial that we understand from all our speakers that all the technologies are important and we have to learn and be experts in all of them, right?
Thank you so much. Now let's go to our chairperson of this session, Vardhaman Kankaria. He's a prolific phakic refractive surgeon from Asian Eye Hospital, Pune. He's been doing a great job as far as the refractive surgery is concerned. Uh, we have just to, before Anand's talk, we want to know exactly about, we want to know your talk, then Anand will talk about perfecting the SMILE. So you will be talking first about suction loss management in SMILE, then we'll go ahead with the perfecting my SMILE. Okay, over to you, Vardhaman.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. KB, for the kind words. So actually it is, I mean, in a way, order in reverse. I'm going to speak to you about something that is one of the most common incidences or complications you would see as a early refractive surgeon, which is basically suction loss during SMILE. And I'm going to tell you the nuances of how to deal with this. And the whole thing that you have to understand is nothing is lost if you encounter a suction loss. So intraoperative complication during SMILE have been already elucidated, and we have also published a review article about the same. What we have seen overall is that the literature quotes about 1 to 2% chance of intraoperative suction loss during the SMILE procedure. To understand suction loss, let us understand how the SMILE works. As we understand, SMILE is a minimally invasive refractive lamellar procedure in that we essentially create a lenticule intracorneally at the stromal level. This involves use of a very, very accurate Visumax femtosecond laser. And the way it is being done in this animation, as you have seen, first you have a refractive cut, which is called as a posterior cut. After that, the femtosecond application will create what is called as a side cut. Then there will be a cap cut or the anterior cut, and then you will have an axis of the small incision. So with all these 4 cuts being done in accordance and completely, then only you will have the access to the lenticule, and the second part will be to remove this lenticule. If there is any halt at any of these steps and you lose suction, that means that the remnant part of the cut has not been performed. So basically, I'm going to talk to you about how to deal with this situation if such a thing happens with you. The studies have shown that if you actually look at all these 4 steps, then where do we have the suction loss as the most common incidence is during the cap cut. The reason being that when the refractive cut, which is the posterior cut, has happened, because of the cavitation bubbles, the patients will have a kind of fuzzy or blurry vision, and that is the time when the patient starts to become more apprehensive and start to move his eyes. That's why it is most common with the cap cut. which is followed by the refractive cut, and of course the smallest incidence is going to be during the end, during the small incision creation. What happens if this suction gets lost? So basically, if the suction gets lost, there will be this window that will come up, as you can see, and that window will
Vardhaman, we lost you.
After that, it will give you the option of proceeding further by changing your parameters, or you can even choose to possibly change your procedure to a femtoLASIK if it is desired so. So as you see, this is the first thing. As you can see, this is the refractive cut which is being done, which is the posterior cut. And that is when this patient has moved, you can see this conjunctival protrusion which has occurred. And when there is this refractive cut, the VisuMax will not allow you to progress with the smile even after redocking. You have to convert this patient into a flap. So basically you have to redock the patient, make sure that you are very well centered. And this is the flap which is being created. After the flap is created, you have to just lift the flap and perform a femtosecond LASIK on this patient. So this is one option. Other option, of course, is that you can convert this patient into a surface ablation procedure. At the second step, which is a lenticular side cut. So if you have a cut during the lenticular side cut, as you can see on the video on the left-hand side, this is the refractive cut which is being done, which is complete. And just before the lenticular side cut, you will see that the patient has moved. So there was this femtosecond application which was incomplete beyond that. And what is being done again now, because this is still a part of the refractive cut, the VisuMax laser will again ask you to convert this eye into what is the flap maker. So basically it is going to convert into a flap after redocking. After again, if you lift the flap, after that you are going to progress with the femtosecond LASIK. But what is now more important, which is the most common thing, as we have discussed already, is when you have a cut, you have a suction loss during what is called as the anterior cut. So during the cap cut or the anterior cut, this is the most common time when the patients will start to actually, as you can see, move, especially if they are very, very apprehensive. So if they have moved, now the beauty of VisuMax or the beauty of the femtosecond laser is that it is so precise that if you are able to redock with the accurate centration, it will exactly restart where it has left, and it will allow you to continue with smile. So as you can see in the second video on the right side, what I'm doing now with a help of a small Sinskey, I'm just making sure that I get the right centration, which is marked onto the
Vardhaman, we lost you in between, Vardhaman.
Let's
Can
wait.
can see
Let's wait
this
for him.
mark,
Dr. Vardman,
this mark here.
Dr.
Yeah.
Vardman, can you hear me?
in between,
Yes.
we lost you. In
Yes.
between, we lost you.
Seems there's a bandwidth issue. You can just put off your video, then we can hear you easily.
Yeah, that's good. I think I'll do that then. 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, what I did was I maintained the centration at that ink where it was, and then it proceeded with smile. Now I will show this video again because I mean my video was lost. You can see that this is the ink mark which is there, and then now that I have centered my smile application again after docking, we just proceed with the step which was incomplete just from before. So now the posterior cut was already made, the side cuts were already made. So I am now cutting the anterior cut only, which is the cap cut. And now the small incision has been made. Once the small incision has been made, then I actually just took the patient ahead. And now this patient has, basically it was very easy for me to remove the lenticule in one piece. And it was a very, very good and a complete removal of lenticule in one piece. Patient achieved excellent outcomes. As you can see, I could enter the anterior cap very, very easily. Once that is done, I'm going to be sure, I'm a bit slow here because I want to be sure that I really do not intersect with any of the other interface. I'm going posteriorly now. Once I go posteriorly again, in slow fashion, I'm dissecting the lenticule, making sure that the edges are well delineated. And now once I completely yes, dissect this lenticule. During the cap cut, which is one of the most common times when you will have this suction loss, it is still possible to go ahead and perform a smile procedure. So one of the rare chances that you will have, which is very, very uncommon, is to actually have the suction loss during what is the small incision. So this is the fourth step of the femtosecond application, as you can see. And this is the refractive cut, which was done before. Now there is the anterior or a cap cut, which is being done. And during the small incision, you can see there was a small protrusion of the conjunctival sac there. So because there was a small protrusion, I thought maybe the small incision has been completely being made. So when I took it to the observing microscope, I tried to see if it was complete or not. And you can actually see the line of the small incision, but I'm not able to enter it. Why is that? That is because the application of the femtosecond laser or the physics of the femtosecond laser is such that it starts to cut the cornea from the posterior side and then it cuts to the anterior side. So in this case, what had essentially happened is that posterior 50% cut was done, but it was not completely epithelialized. So what I realized after that is that actually the small incision, some of the laser pulses were still remaining to be fired. So as you can see on the left side, only a small incision will be created now, as you can see, and the rest of the lasers were fired. And then I could actually enter the lenticule very, very easily, as you can see on the right side now. Once the lenticule was entered, I could again dissect the lenticule very, very easily, like what we have seen also in the last video. And yeah, because of the want of time, I will just forward this video. As you can see, I'm dissecting this lenticule where we had lost suction during the small incision. And now this was the anterior dissection, which was already done. Now I'm going posteriorly very gently, and I'm making sure that it is dissected again. And now this will be removed in one piece. So basically, even if you have suction loss during this step, it is very, very easy to remove lenticule in one piece and have a great outcome. Now, the last time that I'm going to show you is a very unique case, because in this case, again, we had suction loss during the small incision, but you can see now there were like a eminent possibility of suction loss that I was seeing, but I thought I'll take my chances. So although the lenticule ablation was complete, I could see that the small incision again here was not created. But as against the last case, in this case, the small incision pulses were all fired, because this was like a pseudo suction loss. So there was conjunctival protrusion and I had fired already all the pulses. So there was no point of redocking and creating the small incision again. And now here the main thing was the lenticule was complete, but of course I could not have the access to the formed lenticule because the small incision could not be created. So we all know that there is something called as a Circle software. What is this software? This Circle software is a software which converts the smile cap into a have the interface which will join to the original interface of flap. So we change the parameters of the Circle software in such a way that the cut in this case was only 3 millimeters. It means that we tweak the parameters to have the hinge, which was almost 270 degrees. So because of this, we could actually do, as you can see now in this video, we created this circle, but we created only a small incision with the circle. And with this, again, we could progress with the smile lenticule dissection. And once the lenticule was dissected out, we could remove it very nicely in one piece, and the patient achieved excellent 6/6 outcome on the first day itself. So actually, this was a novel use of circle to deal with this situation. And we gave the patient the full benefit of keeping the procedure flapless. So this is the first day post-op, and this case we have already published in JCS. So basically, to conclude learning curve, the amount of times you're going to have suction loss will read before the procedure to make them understand what to expect during the procedure. Make sure that their anxiety level reduces a lot. Make sure that there is not a lot of water in the conjunctival cul-de-sac, and you kind of dry the conjunctival cul-de-sac, keep it very, very little moist so that it does not try to create, like it does not slip away. There is no conjunctival protrusion which happens during the same time. So if you actually follow all these things, as we have seen already, although you may have suction loss still sometimes in during your career, but you will be able to deal with it very, very well. And if you have suction loss, nothing is lost if you have suction loss. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Vardhaman, for wonderful videos. I think every smile surgeon definitely, when you smile practice becoming more and more, you tend to get suction loss. So what I do actually, there are some patient with the over anxious patient, whatever you make the conjunctiva dry and cornea semi-moist, within a fraction of second, the conjunctival sac will be filled with fluid. These are the some anxious patient. So what I do normally when I'm about to dock, that moment, once again, last moment, I keep a dry bud in the corner so that all the fluid will be drained out of to that bud, so that the incidence of suction loss will be much lesser. This is the one precaution I am taking. And the second precaution, few of my friends, I think Dr. Kumar was telling me that he has got a speculum with this one small slight suction which is attached to the speculum. So by putting the speculum, he always puts, especially in the patients with a very anxiety patient where there is excess watering whenever you are about to dock. In such patient, I think these kind of speculum may helpful also. Of course, one more thing about, you showed with me the last video about that, about to put the incision, you had a suction loss. I still remember in way back almost 4 or 5 years before, when Sri Ganesh was doing live surgery in my hospital, he had a suction loss in the similar point. But what he did actually, he took a crescent knife. He just asked for a crescent knife. Then he opened the incision and immediately he gone ahead. It's all up to your confidence level and how you think about the case. Once again, it is a fantastic videos. I think more the cases you do, then more you tend to get a complication. The key to success is how you handle the complication is very, very important. Thank you once again, Vardhaman. Let's go to the last talk of this session by Dr. Anant Doddaramegowda. He's a prolific phaco-refractive surgeon, high volume surgeon. He'll be talking about perfecting smile my way. He's from Coimbatore, basically from Karnataka, but settled in Coimbatore. Over to you, Anant.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. You can see my screen. Is it audible?
Yeah, very much.
It's audible. Yeah. Thank you, Zeiss and AOC, for giving this opportunity. As KP sir told, with doing high volume surgeries, I think we have been able to perfect our smile in our own ways. The most important thing what we need to remember is, as Ritika was telling, we need to keep up with our promises to become a brand. It's a digital native now. We are thinking about the positivity that we get from word of mouth patients. But in the same way, if some complications happens, we may lose the patient and we may lose our brand also. This is the drawback with the refractive surgeries. We market it as very efficacious, very safety, and very predictable. So at each and every point, we should make sure that this smile procedure is efficacious, it is safety, and the results are predictable. To achieve all these three things, the workup starts from meeting the patient from first point till we complete the procedure. Already we are aware since 2012, we are doing this smile procedure. It's already a good technology because it is developed by the Zeiss company, which has got history of 170 years. When people were confused about way from optimized and customized, this technology came in, and thousands of surgeries have done worldwide. It's a flapless procedure. It's a bladeless procedure. It's minimally invasive. And as Pooja mentioned, there are so many advantages. The biomechanics is good. Nerve sensitivity is good. There is no induction of the dry eye. It's a perfect technology. But when we start talking to the patients, our workup starts. Vision checking is very important. If you suspect any accommodation issues, you have to go with a cyclorefraction and then take up for the surgery. If there is a significant difference between the manifest and the topographic astigmatism, you need to literally work up. If you miss there, then you may land up having a overcorrection or an undercorrection. The quality of the vision is also assessed by the tear film. So tear film assessment in terms of T-BUT and Chimus, the basic test has to be done. If there is any evidence of minimal dryness also, you need to work up the patients thoroughly. Aberrometry has to be done, even though we are not going to do anything with the aberrations. If the aberrations are the higher side, we may prefer to go on with the femtoLASIK rather than a SMILE. And any retinal complications post-SMILE surgery should not be blamed upon the SMILE, so get it thoroughly evaluated by a retina surgeon. And I always make SMILE procedure as a family issue. Whenever a patient comes, I will first ask him who is going to pay for the procedure also. I'll make sure his parents, his brothers sit along. I show them the video. I tell them it's just a 1-minute procedure. You'll be safe in my hands and I'll be giving the best of the results. Next, some apprehensive patients may ask, what so if I'm not able to see the green light? The options of all the things will be explained to him. And sometimes it has happened so that even after explaining, if there is a section loss, we might have shifted the patient to a femtoLASIK also. But this will be thoroughly explained to the patient because I need to align my patient towards the perfection of the spine. Next, coming on to the intraoperative procedures. We do not need an excessive moisture surface or a dry surface while doing the procedure. I will make sure that I am putting a Paracaine drops 5 minutes prior to the procedure, 1 or 2 drops. I don't want to put when the patient is on the table. This is what I've practiced since 2014. And second important thing, we need to understand that even though the femto passes through the patient interface, it's a closed system. I want my AC and the humidity to be well under control. The results do not, the temperature do not influence the results, but we have seen over years that the SMILE machine, the laser head, needs an adequate temperature. If the temperature is too cold or too hot, it gives a message that again the machine to be reprimed. When we speak to the company, they tell us to switch off the machine, wait for half an hour, control the humidity, control the temperature. So if I'm planning my services at 2 o'clock, I make sure my engineer goes at 1 o'clock, he controls the temperature and humidity, because if something happens, I don't want to postpone the procedure by 1 or 2 hours. This is the first stage where I perfect my SMILE. Intraoperatively, once the thorough refraction is done, my senior optometrists who assist me, I always tell them that they pay huge amount of money for the procedure. You double check the data or the refraction data, what you are entering. And cone selection is always this size for SMILE. Most of the times we never use the M-shaped cone. And the energy settings, if you see here, with our machines, ours, I think we bought it way back in 2000, early days of 2014. Still my energy setting, I maintain it at 32, but the second SMILE installation, that machine will maintain energy at 30, which I'll be discussing in the next slide also. This is important. Once the patient is on the table, I tell the patient that you need to open both eyes, look into the green light for 15 seconds, then a soft touch will come. Nothing to panic, just relax, you'll not feel any discomfort. This is very, very important because we do not want suction loss at any time. While draping, as Dr. KP was mentioning, everyone has got their own modifications. Preoperatively only, we have to rule out the blepharitis, uveitis, rotated. We don't want any mucopurulent secretion to come and block the femto passage. And the most important thing, what I have observed in my cases is, a good suction always develops when we aplate the cornea. You can re-see the video again. We aplate the cornea when I touch around 50 to 60%. The suction develops very well and uniformly. This is the second step. And this is how a perfect laser delivery has to happen. You can see here, this is how the perfect laser delivery should come. A uniform distribution. You are not seeing any patches and you are not seeing exaggeration of the bubble layers. This is very, very important because we are getting a perfect laser delivery. This is very important. You could see how perfectly the laser has been delivered. If you feel the opaque layer is more, we need to reduce our energy from 30 to 29. We need to optimize the energy of the machine. If too much of black spots are appearing, that indicates the femto is not able to dissect the corneal tissue. We may have to increase it. Whenever the black spots appear, it's better not to proceed with the procedure because the tissue may not be dissected very well at all. For the next patient, you need to increase your energy and then proceed. Next, third thing is identification of the plane. This is very, very important. When I'm opening the side cut, I make sure that, because we tell the patients that it's a pain-free procedure. While identifying the plane, if you loosen up the epithelium, that becomes a painful procedure. The irritation because of the loosened epithelium will stay for 6 hours. So here also I'm perfecting my smile. I see the video. We do epithelium to loosen it. We have to be crystal clear in identifying the plane. That's very, very important. The epithelium should not loosen up. Next. Always the anterior plane is identified first. For the posterior plane, we should see a silver streak appearance. We do not want a lost lenticule to happen. While doing the movements, the swiping movements you can see there, it should start from one end to the other end, like how we do a good cortical cleanup in the phaco. We start from one claw cover, go around a circle and come there. Oppositely, we are not going in and out. You can see, yeah, this is how I dissect it, because we don't want any minimal amount of lenticular tissue to be attached to the cap. This is especially important whenever we're handling the very low-end refractive errors, -1 or -1.5. The separator may pass in through the lenticules, some amount of tissue may be stuck into the cap. This may lead for residual astigmatism post-surgery. This is where we have to perfect our smile. And initial days, there was a saying that smile doesn't have a wow factor. When Naranethral did a study and so many papers have been published that wow factor is not there because there are Bowman's undulation. After understanding this, I have made sure that this is one protocol that I follow, that I along the cornea multiple times to correct the Bowman's undulation, and I could see when compared to the earlier days, the wow factor has literally increased in my patients. And post-operatively, I do prefer to put antibiotic and steroid for a week or so, and lubrication minimum for 1 month. If 2 patient complaints of discomfort, I may continue for 2 months. When they come for follow-up, I do, if there are any complaints, we would like to investigate. And majority of the time, since we take all the perfect steps to do a perfect procedure, we hardly come across the complaints. So, and this is all the known facts to whom we offer and not to be offered. And thank you.
Thank you, Anand, for a wonderful talk. I think you showed as simple as that possible, because see, the talking about the O factor, I think nowadays we get most of the cases patient nested itself 6/6 vision. Once again, once you become the initial period of your career, initial results will be patient won't have the O factor, but once you do 100+ cases, then the results are becoming better and better. That's what even that day in the discussion with the Professor Secundo, who is the first man to do smile. So he was telling soon the company may come with a hyperopic license. So what he told, if you want to start a hyperopic license, only the senior smile surgeons should do, because you will have a large lenticule, you may have slight difficulty to dissect. So the senior surgeon should do operate. So my take home message, especially as far as the wow factor is concerned, next day, if you do a very minimal manipulation, then next day patient will have a very good vision. No excessive manipulation is the one key. And second one is ironing the cap is very, very important. That reduces most of your microstriae. That, of course, if you leave the microstriae also, the patient will come back to us within a 1 month. There is no change. But if you want a wow effect to the patient wants to see everything very next day, very clearly, 6/6 or 6/5. I think these are the 2 steps. Ironing the cap and minimal manipulation should really help her. I think Vardhaman, your points on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was It was a wonderful talk, Dr. Anand. And basically, as you correctly said, smile is definitely for all of us smile surgeons, definitely the first go-to procedure because it has so many more advantages over the flap-based procedures. So that gives you that additional confidence. Fact, as Dr. KP sir has just said.
Vardhaman, we lost in between. We cannot hear you, Vardhaman. Vardhaman, there is some, I think, bandwidth problem in Vardhaman's system. I think. You cannot hear, no, Anant, Vardhaman?
No, sir, we can't. I think we have lost him.
Yeah, I think you have see the nice videos. I think any new ideas from Pooja Kamal, she's been regarding the fine tuning of the smile, Pooja?
No, no, sir. I think
Yeah,
what
Dr.
Dr. Anand and you said it, and Dr. Vardhaman was commenting on that sums it up pretty well nicely. And I think you are senior, so I have learned from you. So I don't have anything to add.
You do a good smile surgery. We appreciate you also. There are a lot of studies.
Only one thing we have seen is the strength of the cornea. If the strength of the cornea is on the higher side, the dissection is little bit tougher. That has nothing to do with your surgical skills, but it's just how your cornea is. So that is when your patients on the second day, like first post-op day, might have little bit of quantity of vision will be there, but the quality will improve with time. But otherwise, if everything is normal, it shouldn't be a problem. So that is one thing which we have seen, which is not depend on the surgeon or the skill. So
even I was going through some of the literature. Actually, after 3 months of the results, if you take 100%, 60% of the patient had an unchanged of the same vision. Whatever the pre-operative visual acuity they had, corrected visual acuity they had, they are going to get the same vision. But 8% of the patient gained more than 1 to 2 lines. That is very, very important in smile. And even 4% of the patient, some of the studies I was going through, even they gained 2 lines also. Except I think 1 or 2% of the patient might have dropped because of the excessive manipulation and some intraoperative problem. Apart from that, definitely this is much superior refractive procedure than any other technique available in the market.
I totally agree with you, sir, because it's just like what they say. It was like the hype that smile as a larger learning curve. It was just in the past. I think now it doesn't hold true because how you teach your new fellows and everything also makes a difference. We have a lot of fellows whom we train, and when they do next post-op, they also patients read 6.6 on day 1, and eventually they improve. And like the visual outcomes are similar across all 3 procedures, and even in higher astigmatism it's similar in all 3 procedures. So I don't think that myth what was there is there anymore. It is just probably when smile came in and everyone was learning, but now I think it performs equally well as your contour or any topo guided procedures.
Even I have tried with many cases with the lenticular axis without no dissection. I go with the little bit of the one bent forceps. Just with the forceps only I open the lenticule. Then I try to peel both from cap and bed simultaneously and do something called a reverse axis. It's called lenticular axis.
So I learned that from you, sir.
Yeah, that is very good results. Next day you should see there is absolutely fantastic cornea, nothing. Normally in such cases, even I don't go inside and irrigate the interface also.
I have a question for all of you. So what is the energy do you use? Do you also believe that lower the energy, better the...
Initially, like Anantam, I had an energy level of 32. Then later on, I dropped to 31, now 30. I think now my machine energy level is 29. Definitely lower the energy, always better the results. That's what I felt in the over years. Because first couple of years, my energy level was 32 and I was not bothering that. But once I dropped the energy level, the overall the quality of the vision or even the clarity from the patient is much better. And immediate post-op results are ultimate with the lower energy level.
And would you recommend it like going like one step like lower, like it's
don't drop from 32 to 29, 32 to 31, 30 like that you drop. Sri Ganesh dropped like 32 to 29 or 27. I think 27 is his energy setting, or 25 also might be. But I think don't drop that much. I think slowly you drop from 32 to 31, 30. That is better.
Yeah, I think
Vardhaman,
I
you
will.
will take
I
on.
will
Sorry, in between we lost you. Then we have to continue with
No,
discussion.
I'm sorry to have my internet glitches. So I think as you have been correctly saying about the energy optimization, definitely it is better that we go in a graded fashion, and lower energy where the dissection or the energy is most well optimized will give you the smoothest dissection, and that is what will result into what is the wow effect. So I think it also depends on the basically the region in the world. For example, for some Chinese eyes or for the Western Caucasian eyes versus the Indian eyes, the energy optimization might be different. Some centers I've heard that they have gone on as low as 23 to 24 also. But for Indian eyes, I believe, as Dr. KP sir said also, that 29 is what we are playing with. However, we have to always understand for that given eye, if you feel that at 29 also, if you are having either slightly at the edge of the lenticle, you are having those finger like extensions, then you can drop it by a line. Or if you have a small black spot that you are seeing, then you can increase it by a small point or so. So you have to always play with that in the in what is called as the expert mode of the smile. But definitely, as I think we are saying, the smile is definitely the go-to procedure, the future of refractive surgery with so many advantages. And most important thing that I'm seeing is that more, I mean, as much as a surgeon we have the confidence over smile, the patients have equal or more confidence on smile, because we have gone through the whole era from RK till smile now. So as the procedures have got evolved, patients were not any way thrilled as much as when we say flapless procedure. Because for patients, when they just hear that it is no flap, like I give them option of LASIK, bladeless classic, and a smile procedure. So I tell them that this is flap with the blade, this is flap with the laser, and this is no flap, no blade. So when they say no flap, they're instantly they get convinced. So you don't have to really sell the technology to them. They are convinced on their own because they quickly understand that intuitively also this is going to be the most minimally invasive procedure. What that is what we understand, and what we have also understood from Ritika's talk is that now this is the generation which talks to the technology. So many times they already have understood the benefits when they come to you, and they want to know if the smile is possible for them or not. And you just have to give them the answer, yes, you are good candidate for smile, and just go ahead with that. And with all the tips that we have seen with Dr. Anand, I think as you do more and more procedures, your results are going to get refined. And 6.6 on day one is like a norm, like in LASIK now. We get surprised if somebody is actually reading 6.6 parts or 6.9 on the first day itself. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we'll end the session. Thank you once again, Dr. Vardhaman. You are chairing the session. Wonderful talk by Pooja, Dr. Anand, Rajan Gupta, and also the lot of take-home message as far as the marketing concerned by Dr. Ritika Sachdev. Thank you, one and all. Once again, I thank Zeiss for this opportunity. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
sir.